I've got it. Start video.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. We will get started here in just a minute. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. We'll get started in just a second with the program, but I wanted to take a minute and let you know a little bit how the Oklahoma Manufacturing Alliance is growing stronger for 2021. The Oklahoma Manufacturing Alliance is evolving into a better, more efficient approach in support of state industry and individual manufacturers. One of the ways we want to share that detailed expertise is through these webinars. This is just a brief overview of one of our new programs, Creating a Business Transformation. Of course, we still rely heavily on our network of sponsors and partners. Those partners are on, many of those partners have the capability and services that complement our goal of making your business more successful. We certainly cannot do it alone. We have many of our sponsors and educational partners on the call today and want to say thank you to all of those who are joining us. And remember, MEAs are still available and accessible, and traditional services like problem solving, business connections, and engineering work remain available for manufacturers in all 77 counties. We are still there when you need us. And now to our webinar, which will be delivered today by its developer, Mr. Shane Barber. Throughout the event, Shane, as well as myself, Donovan Hensley, and Daniel Kerr of the Oklahoma Manufacturing Alliance will be live and answering your questions as they arise. Please utilize the chat function during the presentation, and we will also have a live Q&A with the team afterwards. And Shane, I'd like to turn it over to you.
All right, thanks everybody. You hear me okay? Good deal. Excellent. Well, thank you for this opportunity this morning. As Jessica had mentioned, there's a lot changing, and it has changed with the Oklahoma Manufacturing Alliance. But for the most part, the center is really chartered by the federal government to obtain and retain manufacturing in the great state of Oklahoma. So this is one of many ways that we do that to continue to grow the manufacturing that is in the state. Today's topic, we'll talk about creating a transformational change. How do you do that within your business? What are the pitfalls? What are the issues that come along with it? And then how do you really harness the power of all of your employees to drive a change? Whether that change is a new product launch, that changes scaling up to a certain capability, or pivoting to different capabilities or different manufacturing based off of what market trends you're seeing. So that's what we'll talk about today, and we'll have an opportunity to do a Q&A at the end. And like all webinars, this is a model that the OMA, what is new with OMA is a holistic model that we utilize to help assess and optimize companies that are partners of the OMA Center. And it's a simple model, and it's based off of a car analogy, but it's it's called the straight six. And from this model, what it suggests at first, as you're reading through it, at first blush, is there are 6 common design choices for your company to really look at how do you optimize it, whether it be strategy. In this case, there's a strategy cylinder. It's the lead cylinder. It sets the timing for the other cylinders as they continue to be in alignment with strategy. And that's kind of the challenge here, is getting the organization aligned and standing behind its strategy and its change. And then how do you use it to transform your company's results? Structure is where, siloization occurs. This is a common issue where in this structure, it must be aligned to the strategy, and more specifically, the accountabilities of each of the leaders that are in the structure or the hierarchy. This is where decision-making lives and that accountability. In people practices, people are in the roles that work within the structure. And so what's very common here is if there is a lack of engagement or understanding by your people, it's can be, changed dramatically if they understand the strategy of the company, where they're headed, how, when, and who is going to be leading that, and having clear expectations and accountabilities and metrics. So in those people practices, this is where you bring role clarity and so you can engage the full person to drive your company's results. In methods and tools, this is where standards are set. And if there aren't standards, you'll have a high variation in your product quality or in the results that you have. It could be quality, it could be safety, it could be your lead times and your ability to deliver to your customer that is affected if you don't have standards. So this is where a lot of the lean methods and tools really can help a company move forward to be much more efficient and effective. And then the lateral processes, this is and how you coordinate, all of these cylinders together, all of the efforts in your company. It's communication, collaboration to drive your strategy to tactical execution. So many times, and I know you all know this, that communication is so underestimated, and the way we collaborate as a workforce stems from issues where we don't have strong lateral processes to get that done. And then the last cylinder, which is the output shaft, is the rewards and metrics cylinder, and metrics drive behavior. And so once a strategy or a change effort is set, you have to go all the way to the end, define those metrics. Then you have to hold the structure accountable, ensure people understand their individual metrics, give them tools to get their work done, and then lastly, communicate and collaborate against it. So today we're going to do a deeper dive, starting to touch on the structure cylinders. How do you take strategy and move it into structure and really get it to get traction on your strategy or your change effort? So it's kind of starting to hand off into this cylinder and get the organization in alignment. We view these all as check engine lights. So the bottom here, if you're seeing misalignment issues with your team, or you have one leader leading a different direction, which is very common, where manufacturing is driving for output, engineering or design is driving for quality, sales is driving for revenue. And so alignment can be a check engine light. If your structure is siloed and they're working independently, not interdependently, to deliver the strategy, then that's another siloization is another issue or check engine light you may see. Lack of engagement, variance, lack of communication, collaboration, which looks like, I thought we changed directions yesterday and we were on a different priority. Well, nobody told me, nobody coordinated that effort to make that happen. So that's another check engine light. And lastly, common goals not being met or goals across the organization, all check engine lights of issues here. And so that's what we use this model for, is to diagnose and really pinpoint what the root cause is. So as we dive into strategy, I really like to pull on what is the typical that we all see, you on the line. So, why strategic change efforts fail when leadership spends a lot of time developing strategies, changes, pivoting their business. Look at all the thrash that all of you were under for COVID, and you're constantly strategically looking at how do we keep the doors open, how do we keep the workforce, and then how do we pivot to some of the opportunities we may have to be able to manufacture during this time. And so leadership spends tons of time doing this, builds good plans, but underestimates the cause and effect of the change. And in this cause and effect of the change, it'll impact your culture, it'll impact your people, and that is the underestimated part. A lot of times they'll say, okay, let's make this change. The next question that should be asked is, whose role does this have the most impact on? Who is most affected by the change? And pinpoint those groups, those departments, or those individuals. And then you want to pull them in and communicate with them what is going to change, why it's going to change, how it's going to change, who will own it, and the timeline that is going to, you start to see those changes. So the changes can be easily implemented if that is well understood, well mapped out, but we got to prepare for it. You just can't sit in the leadership room, conference room, develop how an entire company with employees is going to pivot or make a change and then not communicate it or not communicate it effectively. So that's what we'll talk about today. Typically how this happens again is, owner leader develops a strategy or a way we need to change. The change isn't that is required is not communicated, not well understood. People don't know the priorities have changed. They do the same thing they've always done because it hasn't gotten to their level. And then teams all go in different directions and silos get emphasized here. The change doesn't occur when it's required, and there's a cause and effect. Leadership gets frustrated. When we sit down with leaders, we ask them, the quintessential question of what keeps you up at night or what is causing pain. And a lot of times those leaders will say, well, my team just doesn't understand it. We move slow, we move sluggish. And we say, well, really, say more, tell us more about that. Well, when we made this change from pivoting from distilling spirits and alcohol to isopropyl alcohol for COVID, there was process changes, there was recipe changes, and it took us 3 months to even be able to get a product that was could be qualified for it. And people just didn't seem to know what was going on. Well, it's because this typical approach happens. 3 of us getting in a room seems very crystal clear to us, but when it comes to implementing, the people most importantly to be communicated to are often overlooked. And so what causes these issues, back to this check engine light and what's causing issues in this cylinder is, number one is confusion. People being confused of where the organization is headed. And when a change, no matter how large or small, you constantly got to explain why we're making this change, what, who, how, and when. All simple common sense topics here, but Mark Twain once said, common sense is not that common. From that, the organization will have no North Star and needs a destination. If this is an analogy of a vehicle, of an engine, your employees deserve to know where the next destination is. And if you're changing course on that journey, why you change course and where you're going there. A lot of leaders have given me feedback is, why do you feel so strongly that people out on a production floor or in a design office or out in sales, why they should know what is changing about the company and its strategy? I said, well, shouldn't they know where the vehicle's going to be going so they can pack the vehicle, they can prepare the vehicle, they can maintain the vehicle and get it on the road, keep it on the road? And I've yet to meet a leader that doesn't say, yeah, you're right. So in those goals and metrics, if they're not being met, it's another symptom. And then if you're in daily firefighting mode where the phone is changing your production schedule, what I mean by that is a customer's unhappy, they call you, you prioritize their product over somebody else's, and it gets in the way of your growth and planning for your company. All common symptoms, all common check engine lights. And what they're caused for is the tail end of this is the lack of strategic planning. In previous webinars, we've talked about how to create a strategy. And then webinar number 2 was putting a strategy into action, putting the milestones, the project plan, identifying the how we're going to achieve the strategy, putting the owners of who's going to own each strategic objective, each milestone, and then more importantly, those milestones and those dates. So this last part of this planning phase is, how do you communicate it and enroll and engage people in the change? And this is what today's about. So if those goals and objectives aren't set, lack of metrics and measures aren't identified, organization doesn't know where they are headed, and people just guess at what the organization needs from them, and that's what they do every day. Someone on your manufacturing floor or production floor or in your company today is doing that. They're saying, I think I know what I'm expected to do, so therefore I'm going to do it this way. And if I hope that doesn't offend, but if you're like, I don't think so in our company, just go around and ask people like we do. Is it clear what you're measured on today? Is it clear what your priorities are? And is it clear in the sequence of those priorities and when they're due? Most of the time they'll say, well, it's kind of fuzzy. So the fixes: engage leadership team in a process that sets the destination. Create that endpoint for your strategy. Create strategic objectives and assign metrics. And that's in the strategy to action process that we do, and we've covered in past webinars. And then determine those quarterly goals and priorities. ensure that each team is communicated to each individual so they understand where they're headed and what is needed. And then also what should their goals and objectives be to achieve that strategic direction you're headed in. And lastly, engage leadership influence at all levels. Just because we call it leadership, leadership is not a job description or not a role in a company. It is what we do in all roles in a company to lead towards this destination. And so it's grabbing those people with great influence, and we'll talk more about that in a minute here. So if you're seeing any of these check engine lights in your company today, ask yourself, is your organization aligned in embracing the change that your strategy requires? And that's part of the issue. All change is hard. And this model here, it's really the marathon effect of change. This comes from the Bridges model. It's adapted from bereavement. And the only reason I mention that is the most drastic change you could ever go through in your life. Hopefully nobody online has had to go through that at that level, but it brings up the same emotions. When the change begins, you measure the race of change by the last person that is getting engaged in the change and moving past this neutral zone and accepting that change. And so we all go through emotions of change. Think about when we went through the pandemic, denial, anger, and shock. We saw this everywhere in our neighbors, ourselves, our family, our friends, in our society. Of course, on the media, highlighted every day, and it drove, in the lack of knowing what the future is, it can drive fear and greater anger and frustration, confusion, and stress. And so, unless we know what the new beginning is, what we're losing of the old change and ending, and what the new beginning is, it's really hard to move past that. And it's not trouble-free, and there's no perfect approach. So over communicating is probably the best, and communicating only what you know and only what you have facts on. And so we approach an avoidance here. It's one or two areas in this bottom dead center is, either we avoid it and slip back to the left, or we start to approach the change and start to get creative in how we're going to affect that change. I call this the tick and talk. Our workforce can sway from avoidance. Oops, sorry about that. From avoidance to moving into the change. And it's all modulated by how leadership communicates. And leadership must be present to win. This is what I like telling people. You got to be on shop floors, in sales rooms, out there in the office, daily, talking about the change, where we're at, why we're doing it, and what it means to them. If you just throw the change over the wall and expect them to follow through on their own, good luck with that. And so, you're constantly in a high touch atmosphere depending on your change. But as people start to get creative and move into it, they can become impatient. I know I do. Wow, let's just get to the end destination. What's taking so long? People got to accept it. They'll say, oh, well, maybe we'll just status quo. I've been in teams where people have said, I'm not going to do this, and I'll show you it's going to fail. So, but people that are truly, really just slipping backwards and not forwards. And by the way, they want to pull everybody with them. They're influencing that, positive or negatively. They can be skeptics, and they'll become creative. So that's what leadership is really driving here, is communicating and trying to get everybody creative towards the new beginning, the new part of the change. And then the last phase is hope, energy, anxiety, enthusiasm. It can be exciting. But what I mentioned, change is only measured by the speed of the last person that is engaged in the change. So if somebody's just leaving the starting blocks to the marathon, and somebody here is on their last leg of the marathon, and we're celebrating, you got to pull everybody through this. And you might have folks that it takes time. You might have folks that decide that this change isn't for them. So at the end of the day, we all emotionally react to change. We all go through these phases. We all go through these emotions. And it's leadership's ability to help move people to the new approach, or to what the strategy or what the change is. So, this is just a really good tool where in the thick of change, I've used this where I've said, hey team, gather up, take a look at this transition curve. Where's everybody at? Put an X where you're at and explain why, and go around the room. We did this at OMA, I don't know, 9 months ago, when we were changing on how we were becoming more of the consultative resources to actually support your company. And we platted everybody and we addressed it and we talked this through. So it's an impactful tool you can use to open up communication. So in this, to drive this change, drive your strategy, we covered this in a webinar prior weeks. Really leaders got to set the pace for change. And PACE stands for, you got to have a solid plan, milestones. You got to align metrics to that plan, just like any project plan you have for your strategy. And then you got to communicate and engage your workforce, and then execute and measure. And on this communicate and engage, you want to enroll them in the change. You want to grab those that are most influential at your shop floor, in your sales room, in your office, and pull them together and kind of create a mini leadership team to engage others. And what people need to be engaged or to enroll in it, you must have the fault, excuse me, what you're going to do and to accomplish the strategy, how we will need to implement and make that change. And a lot of strategies are launched. It's all about the what. It's not about the how. And then leadership will say, well, we don't have the how figured out, but we're really going to ask from you to develop the how. Well, you got to spend some time with them so you can get them through. They understand what is, and then develop the how steps and those milestones. Who is the owner of each milestone and task? If you don't assign owners, it won't happen. There won't be accountability. And then when is it required? Milestone dates, Q1, Q2, Q3, over 3 years, we should be here. And you use this to guide your transition. How to effectively implement it. There's some easy steps. Define the change strategy, then define who will be effective, as I've mentioned. How will it be communicated? When will it be communicated? How often will you re-communicate and check status on the change and achieving those milestones? Identifying who are the stakeholders that need informed of the change. If this is a change that changes one department in 2 roles, you would do greater communication in that department, but you still would probably want to make other departments aware of it if their work touches that department. And so define the stakeholders, and then what is the communication plan for the entire organization of the departments? What is the timing? And then capture what the change is, why we're making it, what the benefit will be to the company and the individual. This is another needed step. Why are we doing this? What's the benefit or the risk? And then what will it mean to you? And so these are all just really rules of thumb, easy steps to do right at the tail end when you're polishing your strategy for launch. How do you create this communication message? What is the point of each strategic objective? Most companies will have 3 to 5 things that they're doing, whether it be in technology, on-time delivery, or to improve safety or quality. So for each, if you have these 5 or 6 initiatives that roll up and make up your strategy, what is the point of each one? What does it, why does it need to be done? How will it benefit the company, and who's involved? If that seeming today, it's a repetitive message. It's designed to be repetitive of the what, why, who, and when. And most importantly, what does each person need to know, how it will affect them personally? That's where we get most emotionally charged, when it's, well, what does it mean to my job? Well, it doesn't really mean much to your role. You just need to be aware of it. Oh, whew, great. Thank you. If somebody's in that role, it's what does it mean to my job? How is it changing? How are my metrics changing? And how am I going to be held accountable differently? That needs to be spelled out. So the emotions wrapped up in change and transition for a company is based off of people's fear, unfortunately. And then how to execute it and execute the strategy. Hopefully, you're meeting frequently to manage your strategic planning efforts, making sure you're getting through these milestones. In the first initial, it's creating the milestones, creating the plan, creating the communication message. Then you move it down into setting priorities and how that will schedule out over the next 3 years, and engaging the managers in this, turning the strategy into tactical execution. And then with daily supervisors, leads, team members on the floor talking about what needs to happen today in order to meet the tactics, meet the priorities, and achieve the strategy. So you got to communicate through all these levels, from leadership to management to folks that are out there doing the daily work. And so this is just how to execute to it. And by implementing 3 easy forums of a leadership forum that manages your strategy and its execution, meets twice a month, a daily constraint ops session where you're meeting, talking about the issues that are coming from your floor and what help they need to get the schedule done daily. And then daily huddles where you have frequently daily communication touch points, setting goals, and creating this plan, do, check, act to tactically execute. So all this recommendations, and we have methods and processes where we do this for companies. So creating this cultural change, you got to create this. So if it's a major change that's going to change your culture, you got to create a compelling reason for the change. You have to establish a sense of urgency with everybody. If you don't, people won't realize that this change or this strategy or this objective must be done by the end of the quarter to ensure that we pivot in the marketplace and capture the demand that's there for our goods and services, as an example. You got to share that vision and strategy, create that strategic plan, enlist those people, and communicate. And that's those steps that to create cultural change. I had a let me get out of this because I want to show you. It's hidden. Apologies for this. Let me unhide this slide because I want to share this with you. This is probably the keystone of today's message. And so if you look at how do you create this transformational change? Now let's assume your strategy's developed. Let's assume that you got a solid communication plan and you can address all the issues that need to be done. One of the methods to go about this, and this comes from John Kotter's Leading Cultural Change. It's one of the books he's written. You got to first establish a sense of urgency, the timing. Why the change? What does it mean to the company? What are the benefits or the risk if we don't? And when does it have to be done? When does it have to be completed? If you don't set a sense of urgency, it's like telling your children, hey, we're going to the movies, get ready. One kid's packing his backpack, the next are just down playing with their blocks, and hey, you didn't tell me we're leaving in 10 minutes. So what's the urgency for it? This next step, in step 2, is where you look at your entire workforce and understand the change and say, who in our workforce at all levels, engineering, manufacturing, production, design, sales, who are the most influential? And you can have influential people that are positive, but if they're not communicated and managed well, they can also be negative. But they have people's ear. And so what we do in this space is we take inventory, so to speak, of who are the most influential throughout cross-sectionally across the company. Now let's pull them together in a separate meeting and explain to them, here's the change we're about to go through. Here's our strategy. We've pulled you into a room because you have influence amongst your peers and in your departments. And we want to make sure that our vision and strategy is clear. You understand what that change vision is. And we want to help empower work teams to be able to execute this against our strategic objectives. So you pull in your team. Who is that? It could be a lead on the floor. It could be a 5-axis machinist that is training the new workforce, but he doesn't have a formal coordination role or lead role or supervisor role. It could be that individual engineer that everybody goes to and looks for direction to. And so it doesn't have to be formal management roles or leads or supervision. It's the people that have the most influence that are most likely to get the entire workforce through the change with the least amount of emotion possible. So you'd identify them, create a guiding coalition, and then utilize them to take the vision and the strategy, and then ask them, what's the best way for us to communicate this to your peers, to your departments, and enroll them in it and engage them in the communication, and then empower them to really, as in you're coaching them and equipping them with where we're going over the next quarter, 2 quarters, or year, so they understand how to lead informally within their groups. Then you identify short-term wins. Hey, month 1, we should be here, 2, 3, 4, 5. And these are small. A small win could be, we want to change the way we engage people to where they feel empowered and they feel that they're invested in their role. And we want to drive our attendance to be 100% every day because we have a problem with people being late. I'm just making this up. I did this with a client. So we put a metric in place. We explained to everybody why starting on time is critical to the company. And then we grabbed people that were influential and we started tracking it. And in 5 days, we went to perfect attendance. Does it still oscillate? Sure, people call in, but we changed it considerably from the past. And so you communicate that, you generate those short-term wins, and we celebrate it. One small at a time will build major wins that we want to consolidate and produce more changes. And then lastly, if we're doing this well, we want to anchor these new approaches, these changes, these methods in the culture, in the desired culture we want. A lot of changes have an effect on its culture negatively. And in this, by engaging people in cross sections in your teams, you can monitor the culture, monitor the results, and monitor the behaviors, most importantly, and then check in with the leadership to see if it's driving this behavior. What do we need to change to drive a different behavior around quality? We said 0 rework, but we found people are hiding tools that are hiding things that need reworked or that have quality issues. We don't want people to hide their quality issues. We want people to highlight it, learn from it. But if we're disciplining people for it, right out of the get-go, or there's fear, it'll drive that. So that's the crux of really driving this change. And the what, if you look at this slide here, what is required, you want to use this to establish that sense of urgency. You want to use this to define what the change is, so you can communicate to this team or these influential people. And you don't have to pull them together as a team. You just can tap them on the shoulder as well, individual by individual, and explain to them why we're doing it, who is important in this change. I'm talking to you because you're very influential in our engineering team. People look up to you, Jim. And so I want to make sure you understand that we need you. You play a pivotal role in this, and your skills are key, and you have great influence. When letting folks know in this area here, in this broad-based action, these short-term wins, scheduling where we should be quarter by quarter, month by month, week by week. And when we hit a milestone, we either clap in public meetings, we buy lunch, or we celebrate it by pulling the whole team together and doing something fun. And then the how here in the anchoring new approaches, it's not the what we achieve with strategy, implementing the what, it's how we react while we're doing it. If we have a lead time that we need to shrink down in our company, we can do that quicker. But if people are hiding quality, if people aren't communicating, sharing best practices, and working together as a team, that could be a negative effect with the company. So we got to really, what is the cultural shift that we need to make? And while we are attempting to make the change, how do we want to behave? And so this is the crux that we use to help companies transform their business and move the business to a different area of performance. So in the end, leadership's role really is to create this clear, compelling change, establish a sense of urgency, share this vision and strategy with 100% of employees, and it's what's relevant to their role, and then really grab your influential people and over communicate with them on the strategic plan, and list and enroll them, and keep the communication open. So in summary, it's really, that model, that Kotter model, and how you drive change, how you create a communication plan, enlist, engage, enroll people in the change, minimize the emotions that change brings with it, and minimize the time it takes to make that transition. Whether it is a small change or a large change, never underestimate the impact on the individual, the team, or the company. With that, we're going to have future webinars where we'll look at how we continue to align our strategy of the organization. And I believe the next one we'll have is how do you align your structure to achieve your strategy. I'll turn it over and see if there's any questions there for Jessica, our moderator, and then we'll open it up to Q&A.
Currently, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so please feel free to utilize the chat and Q&A function to ask any questions that you may have. Daniel or Donovan, do you have anything to add as well?
Well, the only thing that I would add is from an operational management perspective, we've implemented and we've followed this plan. I mean, that's just something I can't overemphasize is we've lived this, we've gone through it, and not only has Shane, did a good job of laying this out, he's lived this, he's implemented this, over many, many years in a lot of different industries. And as he's talking, I'm sure we can all relate and look inward at our own company and say, yeah, that would help here. Yeah, that would help there. Or yeah, we should have done this. But did we do it perfectly? Of course not. Did we learn from it? Absolutely. And, every time you go through something like that from a process perspective, there's so many variables, and you start to learn what's important, what's not with those variables, and you learn how to do it better next time. So as you have questions, I'd love the opportunity to weigh in on those and tell you what our successes and our failures have been. So just fill up the chat box with your questions.
I see one that just came in. It said, people are naturally resistant to change. Absolutely. It's an emotional process. What are some of the tips for persuading others that the change will actually benefit them? I think if you really, draw out, and I'll see if I go to a slide that has this in greater detail. As you draw out, excuse me, it's a hidden slide. If you draw out this what, why, who, when, and how, and tailor it to them as an individual, by us doing inline quality inspections, it will help catch defects more timely, to where we don't have to scrap the entire assembly that you, the machinist, have been building over the 2 weeks, and you have to repeat every single step. So at first, Jim, quality might seem like we're really zeroing in on our issues and holding people accountable, but in the end, we're trying to make it to where we don't scrap and lose money. We don't have to do rework. You don't have to, do the job over again. No craftsman likes to redo their work, especially if it's a bad design or something that could have been caught. And so really just draw what those benefits first to the company is, or what the risk are to the company. And I remember trying to drive, I'll use a soft example. The company I work for, it was rather intense, a large mega corporation, top 10. And it wasn't fun coming to work anymore. And I remember saying, we're going to do things differently. We're going to recognize people. I want to change our culture. And a senior leader told me, Shane, remember, a great place to work starts with a place to work. And the message was, make sure that you're hitting your metrics, and I'll let you culturally change what things that you feel are flawed or driving the stress. But to the company, we got to execute to our measurables, what our customer demands are. And I was like, I remember communicating to people. We can do anything we want if we hit our metrics. We did, and we did a lot of amazing stuff and changed our culture. So what is the benefits to first with the company? Because it's not about the individual, it's about the company. But if they can see themselves benefiting as well, and reduced frustration, reduced amount of labor, workload, it's like lean. We can make your organizations more efficient, save steps, save walking, looking for parts, save frustration. And then I ask it in form of questions. If we reduced quality and rework, would this be better for you in your role? Oh, absolutely. I'm sick and tired of redoing, work for 2 weeks. You think I like that? No, we know you don't. So here's what I need from you. Help others understand the need for quality inline inspection, and help them understand the benefits, because I'll stand up there and say it, and then they'll look to you. Another question here is informing the masses more or less helpful with planning if you bring the proposed changes in as a project to involve everyone waiting until the complete plan is formulated? This is good. I've seen this a lot with leaders. They'll say, we're just not ready yet. We're not ready yet. The question here is, when do you inform the masses? Whether it be 8-person company or 80 or 800 or 8,000, when is the right time? And I think it's, you got to understand, what are the levels of change they might see this week, this month, this quarter, and then communicate the long-term plan and communicate what you know at that time. I like to explain to people, I will give you everything I know at this time because it's affecting your role, or it's going to quickly going to affect your role. So only talk to what's affecting them today. Some people will feel that you're withholding information. And I hate it when leaders say this. Well, I can only share with you. It's a need to know basis, and it's all I can share with you. I tell people, look, the sensitivity of our product, our intellectual property, and our customer, and our disclosures we have signed, we can't communicate what this part is for or where this part's going. But what I can tell you is the following. Notice I gave information there and explaining that. Other part of this question is, when you involve folks, at what level do you engage them? You might need to involve folks earlier because they're a technical piece of this project or strategy. But if you pull Daniel in, and then Daniel talks to Donovan over lunch and says, hey, we're heading this place in our business, and here's what I'm doing, then at the end of the day, the word's out. So you're safe for communicating the global change to everybody. And then say things like this: we will be starting with people that will help us put the strategy together and how we're going to affect this. We don't have it all worked out, and we're going to be tapping into folks that have that knowledge. So if Daniel, like Daniel example, I'll be tapping into you because you're our lead designer. And as we get these designs done, then we'll communicate with the rest of the group. So don't feel that we're sharing more with others. It's only we're bringing people in to help us do this. And we're open to suggestions. So that's an example of that. Another comment was, I worry more about causing more anxiety than we relieve. Yes, that's a fine line, but I'll give you an example. It was 9/11, the morning of it. I was in a very large company, Intel Corporation. I was the incident commander for a 5,000 person site. 9/11's going off, and the time of day, it was 10 in the morning. So you know where we all were at that point. And we had big TV screens, and somebody wanted to turn on the TV and do live CNN feeds. And at first I said, should we be showing these feeds? Because it'll drive anxiety. Well, then a senior leader told me, and it was a teachable moment where I learned, because I wanted to keep it under wraps, right? Oh, don't communicate. And they said, Shane, do you know how many families that, people, because we hired a lot of people from New York, there'll be more anxiety if we don't share it. They'll think we're trying to hide something. Let's openly put it in the cafes so people can get a constant update, because this is, a major stress factor, right? And I remember going, you're right, we should openly just put it on. And so, did that drive anxiety? We got feedback to people like, that was so great that you used all media. We pumped it in, in every area that had a TV, because they felt they least understood what was going on in the world. That's a major crazy example that we hope we never have to see again. But it's that fine line. Is it driving anxiety, or is it anxiety in leadership that you're really worried about? Now go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I heard and I can't remember who the interview was. It was on NPR. They were interviewing one of the new horror directors for movies, and he had this great formula of how he went out and built these. He was just raking in money, and his movies were terrifying. It was movies like Blair Witch Project and things like that. And he said his formula was keep the monster hidden to the very end. That anxiety of the monster not being there, you kind of create what it is. And I think that analogy kind of fits here. Now we've got to be careful, and we've got some modules that will help with this, with direction of the business. As long as the leadership can show a direction and saying we are confidently in charge, that means and we're headed in this direction, and we need your help getting to this, and this is how we need your help. The monster is no longer hidden.
Yep.
And
it's a great
and you're bringing your people into the solution. You're not telling them, I need you to tell me what direction to go. You're telling them, we're headed this direction. Follow me. It's not scary. We're going to go. I need your help getting there.
Yep. And just non-communicating. It's amazing to me, in the 1,000 of production floors I've walked over the last 30 years, that when companies will be incredibly successful, their strategy is to grow and scale up. And I've walked floors as a consultant. I'm like, hey, what do you think the challenges are of the company? If I had a magic wand and waved it, what would you improve? Just easy questions here. And they're like, hey, are we going out of business? I'm like, why would you ask we're going out of business? Well, I don't know. I mean, they've hired you as a consultant. We're starting to see changes. Leadership's meeting that room over there more frequently. I'm like, no, your company's incredibly successful. They're trying to figure out, how do we scale it to the next level so we can grow it, because the demand's there. And like, oh, okay, great. So all organizations, the lack of communication, they feel they're terminal, or the monster's being hidden. Let's not hide the monster. But are we going to say that, if we miss shipments over the next, continue to miss the shipments we have over this next quarter, we're going to be out of business? Well, that's the fine line of how much anxiety do you share. You could say, we have historically been missing shipments to our key 3 customers. They have given us feedback that, if this continues, they may not recontract with us. What we need to focus on is our on-time delivery. We need everybody to focus there. It is a threat to our business, but we have the capability and the people to be able to do this. So let's roll up our sleeves and partner to get this done. Notice I didn't say you're going to lose your job. Then I leave. If I'm not present to win, I should be walking through daily. How's it going? How's it going? Hey, can I talk to you for a minute? Sure. About that change. Will we lose our jobs? Well, ultimately, if you miss, what do you think? If we missed on-time delivery for customers and they got happy, we'd lose contracts. And then ultimately we could, but that's not our focus. We don't want to lose on-time delivery, so we don't get there. So help engage with me and how to do it. Do you have any ideas, Daniel? And Daniel goes, well, yeah, that's why I'm asking. I think if we did this, this, and this, that's what's keeping us, from doing that, and you engage the person immediately. That's what leadership doesn't realize, because they have their own anxiety. They launch the change. Okay, great. I communicated. And then they get upset because it's not happening, because they're not present to win. They got to be walking through in stand-ups, in huddles, individuals, if you're sitting down, if you see somebody eating, hey, mind if I sit with you? Open forums, town halls, all of those communication devices, emails from the president, the GM, from the production manager on status updates. Never under communicate. Try it with your spouse or SO by communicating, only just a little bit. It drives anxiety and it drives frustration, and it never ends well. So other questions or comments based off of how do you communicate changes or strategic directions to transform your company? Maybe there's a question on, has anybody in the group ever pulled together your high influential people and asked them to help you with the change in your company today? Have you ever tried that? Because I know you know who they are. Those are the people that can make chaos out of the change, continue to drive the fear, or the people that can say, Daniel, it's not that bad. It's inline quality. We should be doing it anyhow. Quite frankly, I'm embarrassed as a machinist that we don't check tolerances against the drawings. Well, Shane, the drawings are wrong. Well, then let's go give that feedback so we can have that changed or have that fixed. So has anybody really tried to tap into your influential folks that actually do the work? Because if you haven't, I would urge you. They're out there, and your team knows who they are. If you just ask in a leadership team, who are most influential across the company? Oh, it's Donovan. It's Jessica. Oh, that Daniel guy, he's influential, but sometimes he drives it the wrong direction, and people get kind of concerned. Well, great. Let's over communicate to Daniel so he has the right direction he's communicating. Or let's say, hey, Daniel, you're very influential. We need you to be, positive and not drive fear. And this is why we want to engage you further and invest in you. So if you haven't, I urge you to do it. Whether you're a 3-person company or a 110,000 person mega corporation, it only creates a need for communication. The number of people you have increases the need for communication, especially when change is involved. Other questions? Here we go. I have it. It didn't go so well. I'd like to start from the roots of the company. These guys are doing the work every day, and they are the experts. Troy, I guess it's Troy here. I can tell you believe that, and I bet you buy into what's called servant leadership. If we believe that our number one asset are our people, not our equipment, not our facility, not our technology, it is our people, and we believe that they are the experts in what they do, then those are the ones we got to start with at the grassroots. And it's kind of like refueling an airplane. I don't know if you can see my fingers. The grassroots have to meet leadership here. But like refueling an airplane, you're constantly steering and redirecting and steering. And so you engage the experts on the floor, equip them of where we're going to be at what time so we can meet at the rendezvous point. And then how do we make bump steering, direction changes from floor and from the top? Then if we get those two connecting, watch out. We can make change happen that is trouble-free or that has less emotion attached to it. There's always going to be emotion in the change. And so by leveraging these experts, whether it be on-time delivery, quality, why are people leaving our company? I would hold an open forum. If my turnover rate was above double digit, I would say, hey, I'd really like to grab everybody, round everybody up, whether it be in a town hall or a huddle, and say, we're dealing with people leaving, your peers are leaving, and we as leaders, we're open to your feedback. But if there's to be anybody I'd like to ask, why do you think people are leaving our company? When you ask these experts, be open to their suggestions, because the worst thing you can do is ask people for feedback, do nothing, and ask them again for feedback. And so when you ask an expert, listen to them. If it's something you can't do, explain why. If there's something you won't do because you've made a decision and that's not the type of company we're going to be, explain why. But be open to their feedback. And when they give that, don't squelch it, because they'll never give you feedback again. So that's a really good one, starting from the roots of the company and understanding whom they are. If you don't know who your influential people are, is that a problem? And are you being as present in the, in the workforce as you should be? Because I know if you're walking around talking to folks, you'll start to see those people that are influencing or key influencers of change. And you're not looking for, I'll explain myself. I'm this guy, when I understand what the new change is, I jump, I just leap over here. And then where my emotions hit is when people aren't approaching the new change as fast as I would like. That frustrates me. But I'm one of the first waves of the marathon. And so, I need to spend time being more patient with others and helping leadership and management understanding the change, why it's important, distilling that fear, reducing the frustration, and moving people creatively into this place where we're solving the problems together. And so just by acknowledging, where are you at with the change today, Daniel? Quite honestly, I'm really frustrated. Well, Daniel, yesterday you were fully just excited about it. Well, I'm frustrated today because our inline quality has caused 15 first articles that I can't get anything to pass because the drawings just don't match. Understand it. Well, that is frustrating. Let's go grab an engineer, design person, and machinist, and let's figure it out. And hence engaging people in that. So understand the emotions it drives, understand who are the people that emotionally react the greatest, and then communicate not only with them, but with everybody to move them through this cycle. Room for one more question or comment, and then we'll talk about our next webinar, and then we'll wrap things up today. So any last comment? I'm looking at the chats here. Is there anything we've missed that's in your worry, or how do you go about this to drive change?
And also, the questions don't have to end here. So as you continue to process some of this information and start thinking about, your own situation, your own workplace, your own staff situation, please keep in mind, maybe a year and 2 years ago, OMA was that connector. We were a resource for you. And over the last 1 year, we have spent a significant amount of time, money, resources into becoming the consultant, into becoming the doer. The past OMA was the connector. OMA 2.0 is we are now the consultant. And so we have resources like Shane, we have resources like Daniel, and the material, but more importantly, we have the experience to help you all go through these situations. Daniel made a comment earlier, we have a module for X. And so I just want to instill the message that we can help you with this. And as questions come about, reach out to myself, reach out to Jessica, reach out to anybody you see on here, or your local MEA, and get the questions answered that you need.
Yep. So today's webinar, we have an 8-hour consulting method where if you're going through major change, your strategy or change is well defined. Daniel and myself are dealing with 2 different companies. We're doing this with them as we speak. We help them understand and break their change down into these steps here, create that highly influential team that becomes this guiding coalition that's a cross section of the company, identify those wins short term and how to produce the long term. Change isn't trouble-free. It doesn't happen overnight. You got to spend time as leaders, taking your people through a process. This process by John Kotter in his book is simple. Donovan, if people are interested, Donovan has an article, 11-page article that'll walk you through the cliff notes of this model you're seeing on screen. And if you need us to be your thinking partner to help you through this, give us a call, let us know. And in 8 hours, we can quickly get your organization through this business transformation and create this change plan. So thank you for today. Our next webinar, we're focused on how do you, develop align your strategy to, or excuse me, your structure to strategy. We'll be talking about the common structures of organizations, what is the most common and how they organically just happen and where the flaws are in them. And then how to develop the accountabilities, the metrics of that structure to achieve your strategy. So that'll be coming up soon. On the chat, Jessica has put the website. You can view those webinars that are coming up. We also have a supply chain series, and we'll continue to offer these on a monthly basis. So thanks for your time. You have our emails. Get a hold of us, send a question. And if anybody would like to sit down further, let Donovan, Daniel, or myself know, and we'll hop right on the call. With that, we'll probably conclude for today. Does anybody else have anything else to talk about?
No, I was just going to say our next webinar will be May 11th at 10 a.m. There will be registration links in the post-event email that will be sent out, which will include all of the links to our next webinars where you can go in and register, as well as the link to where you can go view our previous webinars. And I will also include that resource that Shane talked about, the white paper.
Okay. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you next webinar.
Thanks.